G'day Bomber fans, massive game coming up, this massive run of games actually. You get the feeling we're about to find out a lot about our club and where we truly sit. It's a defining month of footy for the Bombers and it starts with a Saturday night blockbuster against Geelong at the MCG for Dyson Heppell's 250th. It's a huge game, so a huge preview, but first some votes from the West Coast win to get through. Alrighty, so the votes were shared around a lot, 5 players received them, Stringer and Durham got the most, Laverty got love from both of us in different ways, Caldwell and Guelphy chipped in as well, Merritt was very close behind. The overall tally, Sam Durham is creeping up closer to Zach Merritt, who is still in the lead. Jai Caldwell isn't far behind Durham, but all of a sudden, Jake Stringer has entered the chat. He has now got more votes than McGrath and Martin, and from there it's a logjam. Keep up the votes, still a long way to go. Alrighty, Saturday night, MCG, 3rd against 7th. Dyson Heppell's 250th, so it's a huge occasion for the club. It's not a home game, but I want to see fans pack out the G for this one. We are heading in as favourites from the bookies. We are the more informed team, but the Cats have a great record against us. They've won the last 6 matches, and not just won, but belted us. They've won 6 losses in a row against Geelong by an average of 51 points. It's why Essendon fans are scared of playing Geelong, and rightfully so. Even when they're playing bad footy like last year, they still manage to absolutely bury us, and that is why this game is so meaningful. It's not just a match against a top 8 side, it's a match against a real bunny. This is going to tell us a lot about our mindset as a club. Are we going to fold and let them destroy us like they have for the last 5 years, or are we going to actually come in and cause a boil over? Prove that we're a footy team that should be taken seriously. The result is going to dictate our moods and expectations as we approach the end of the season. Whether we win or lose is tough to say. I'll try and break it down in a second, but either way, it's going to mean a lot. There is heaps riding on this game. I almost think this is our biggest game of the year up until this point. So let's talk about it. What should we expect to see? How is this game going to play out? Well, it's hard to know what Geelong we're going to see this week. They may be 7th on the ladder, but they are genuinely one of the poorer teams in the comp form-wise. They have won just a single match from their last 7, and before that, they started the year 7-0. They're not playing good footy. They're looking slow and off the beat, but this team doesn't stay down for long. You get the feeling that they're wanting to come out and make a statement just as much as us. If the Cats are, as they have been in recent weeks, expect a flat-footed, leaky defence that genuinely concedes from turnovers, something rare to a Chris Scott team. If they are as they were against the Blues, we should have a field day coming out of our defensive half, scoring from intercepts, but it's a long season full of ebbs and flows. It was just a couple of months ago that they were the premiership favourites who were impossible to keep down, impossible to defend. Geelong can really decide the outcome of this match. If they are that early season team that piled on 18 goals against the Blues and smashed the Lions at the Gabba, there isn't much we will be able to do. But if not, there is a game on our hands. So let's talk about the Cats and how we can exploit them. Well, the Cats at their best have been one of the most structurally sound teams in the comp. You look back at 2022 when they won the flag, they were rock solid at defending a moving footy. They averaged the second least opposition scores from the defensive half, and they themselves scored the most from their back half in the comp. And we saw that early in 2024 as well. Their recent game against the Blues was the worst they have looked at both moving and defending the footy in a long time, and the signs have been there before that match as well. I don't know if it's personnel or fitness, but the Cats are no longer doing the damage they used to do from open play. It means they are having to rely on different means to score their goals, but their midfield has a ton of absentees. Chris Scott will currently be thinking whether or not he should stick to his game plan that won him a premiership or try to find new ways to score, because right now the Cats are trying to be that team that they were at the start of the year, and in doing so, leaving themselves vulnerable on the counter-attack. Carlton found it way too easy to cut them apart when they turned it over, and the week before that, Sydney were doing the exact same. Both teams managed over 60 points from turnovers, Carlton almost 80, and those are two of the best teams in the comp, yeah, but it does show you the blueprint of how you can beat the Cats. If you are defensively sound against them when they have the footy on the hop, you can do real damage the other way, and that makes for an interesting game because both these teams have been pretty poor in the midfield. Both could be expecting to play out of their back half. Usually the midfield is the most important area of the ground to win a game. I think on Saturday night it's the back line. We should talk about the midfield though, because it will still have an impact. We haven't been good in there recently. We were really poor against an undermanned West Coast. This weekend though, we are facing an undermanned Geelong, who have taken backward steps in the engine room in close and personal. They are the worst team in the comp at limiting the amount of clearances their opposition gets, and their clearance differential in the comp is the worst as well. The Cats were exposed a bit out of the front of stoppages last week against the Blues, much like we were against the Eagles. Neither team right now has that impressive of an engine room, so it's genuinely hard to predict who wins this battle, but whoever does, I think it goes a long way to winning the game because it gets you that valuable early territory that you can try and use to lock the ball in the forward half, as long as you don't let them rebound effectively like they have in the past though, because the Cats at their best do not mind losing a clearance count. It means they can use one of their many long, blonde-haired, tall defenders to slingshot the footy back the other way. Watching Geelong is impossible because they all look the same. I feel like they're drafting these long, headbanded blondes on purpose now. We know Geelong are an old team. They draft mature players to stay in the premiership window. They haven't had a rebuild in my time alive. They are always up on the top of the ladder because they have so many big bodies that provide genuine depth for their side. But lately we are seeing the downside of that list management strategy because the Cats have been overworked in almost every game in the last month or so. In fact, only once this year have they won the distance covered stat line, once in 14 games. It doesn't matter how well you set up, how well you control space. Some teams have been running 10 or so Ks more than them each game. They are simply not able to work as hard as other teams. And we're the opposite. When we win, you usually see us with a higher number. I think that is more correlation instead of causation, but it shows you a trend. We can genuinely outwork Geelong if we're up to it, especially on a wide MCG. It's easy to find space on this ground, and that is, if that is the case, it favours the fitter team that can cover more ground, which is most likely going to be us. I reckon we need to talk about one individual who has shown how crucial he is to Geelong's success now that he is out of form, or I guess being made to be out of form through negating roles that teams are now playing on him. We saw it with Adelaide earlier in the year. They put Luke Pedlar on Tom Stewart to try and keep him down. It didn't work, but that got clubs thinking, and since then he has had to battle through tags from defensive forwards. Most recently it was Alex Chincotta who kept him down, and I think that's a really interesting case because it's not just keeping the ball away from a good player who uses it well, it's completely changing the way Geelong are defending and moving footy. Tom Stewart is having to reposition himself to try and find a way to get involved in the game, and it's switching around the defensive magnets to ways they haven't been familiar with because of this newfound attention. The Cats are currently really struggling to find ways to both keep Stewart in the match but also keep the backline functioning, and we saw the desperation rise to new levels when he was thrown in the forward line last week against the Blues for something new. The Cats are out of ideas, and it comes at a good time for us because Matt Guelphy has played similar roles this year on similar players to Stewart. In round 1 he shut out James Sicily, which helped us win the match. I have no doubts that he'll be playing the same role on Stewart this weekend. I think that is set to be one of, if not the most fascinating matchup that could have a huge impact on the result. The Cats will be definitely have some new plans to stop this tag, so it's going to be fun to see what we do to limit his output. I think the way we set up is going to dictate how the game plays out. Selection this week is huge, and there are some real questions as to how we play. Do we bring in Setterfield or Hobbs back into the mix, or even Shield? Or should we trust what we have at our disposal, even though it hasn't been working too much in close and personal in the engine room recently? Are we going to be too tall on a dewy, potentially wet MCG surface? We have 4 key forwards at the moment. I wonder if that's going to play into Geelong's hands a bit if the game isn't played in perfect conditions. And if we do take one out, who do we take out? Do we take out Caddy or Jones? And then there's Nick Cox. We saw Jones playing wing footy and look alright on the weekend. Can we justify having both Cox and Jones in similar roles? Does Goldstein come back in? And if so, will it take away from Draper's impact? We saw Draper play his best game of the year solo last week. I wonder if that is the way we should be playing. I think a lot of this game rests on our forward setup and how we go into the game. It looked great against West Coast under the roof, but that's ideal conditions against a poor team. This is going to be much harder. It could be wet, could be cold. It will most definitely be slippery. Marking is going to be tough. I wonder if we go in too tall and take an advantage on ground level away. Thursday night will be very interesting for both teams, selection that is. The Cats will be thinking about how they can manage their ruck setup. The Koning doesn't look like a number 1 option. They'll be trying to find ways to improve that midfield dynamic. Lots going on, so let's look at team news. Alright, team news, starting with the Cats. One big out. Tom Hawkins is injured. He has been out of form anyway, so it's not a big loss for the match. More of a loss for footy itself. Don't know if it's career done for the champion, who may not end on his own terms, which would be sad. Hopefully it's not. I'd say Shannon Neal comes in for Hawkins. He had a big game in the VFL and gives ruck depth as well. As for us, I genuinely don't know what we're going to do. No force changes. Gresham might be back. If he is, I reckon he comes in for Menzies or even Cox, so Menzies can play a smaller wing role. I don't know. Cox gives us versatility though, so it's really hard to pick. Goldie could come in for Cox now that Jones has wing numbers under the belt. Caddy made things hard for Scott. Can he be dropped, or could Jones be dropped? Or do we just go with 4 talls until it stops working? It's really tough to know. My predicted team is super basic. I think there could be some changes. Could Perkins be facing a week off? We will see. Alright, prediction. We can definitely win this game. I mean, we probably should win this game. We are favourites going into it. Marginally, but still favourites regardless. Based on current form, all signs are pointing towards an Essendon win. You can see a few different ways that we can win this match. We are versatile now as a side, but the Cats do love to turn it on against us. They love to belt us and hand us reality checks. I'm obviously worried going into this one. You'd be strange not to be. I have nightmares about Geelong, but this is also the most confident I've been in years going up to face them. We are positioned for a win, and I think I have to tip ups to get this one done. There will be some question marks if we don't, because these are the matches we need to win if we want to be seen as a legitimate threat and not just making up the numbers. I think it's close, but we win by 12 points. Tough game though. Hopefully the boys are up for it. That is that. Preview done. Hope you didn't get too bored. Cheers for watching. Get out to the game if you can. Support our former captain. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and go Bombers.